Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari Yashodanandana Braja Janaranjana Yashodanandana Braja Janaranjana Yamunatira Vanachati Yamunatira Vanachati Jairada Madhava Kunjavihar Jai Radha Madhava Kunjavihari Jai Gopi Janavallabha Giridhari Gopi Janavallabha Giridhari Yashoda Nandana Praja Yashodanandana Prajajanaranatanmayamunatira Anachahariya Munatira Anachahari Jaya Radhaman Avakunvi Hari Jaya Radhaman Hari Vijanava Givarnari Vijanava Givarnari Asharanandana Prajajanuran Asharanandana Prajajanuran Yamunatira Vanacha Yamunatira Vanacha Jaya Radha Madhava Javiya Jaya Radha Madhava Javiya Jaya Gopala Bhava Girivardha Hari Gopi Ganapala Bhava Girivardha Hari Ashura Nandana Prajajana Rajana Ashura Nandana Prajajana Rajana Yamuna Tira Nachaniya Natira Nachari Haravam Gunjavihari Jaya Radha Madhava Javihari Jaya Gopjanavallabha Hari Vijanavallabha Hari Yashoda Nandana Prajajan Yashoda Nandana Prajajan Ayamunatira Vanacha Natira Vanachari Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Hare Ram, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Hare Ram, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Hare Ram, Rama Ram, Hare Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Hare Ram, Rama Ram, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Hare Ram, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Hare Ram, Rama Rama, Hare Jaya Jaya, Prabhupada, 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 Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Jaya, Prabhupada, Prabhupada, John Vishnupada, Pramsa Prabhupada, Shodasada, Shushimad, His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Maharaj Prabhupada, Ki Jai. ISKCON founder Charya Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. John Vishnupada, Pramsa Prabhupada, Shodasada, Shushimad, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Goswami Maharaj Prabhupada Ki Jai. Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai. Nitai Gaur Pramanande Hari Hari Bol. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 5, Chapter 2, The Activities of Maharaj Agnidhra, text number 1.
Prabhu, Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Yes, could you begin with the chapter summary, please?
Yes.
Thank you.
So I'll read the chapter summary and then do the Sanskrit, etc. So chapter summary. In this chapter, the character of Maharaj Agnidhra is described. When Maharaj Priyavata went off for spiritual realization, his son Agnidhra became the ruler of Jambudvip in accordance with Maharaj Priyavata's instructions, and maintained its residence with the same affection a father feels for his sons. Once Maharaj Agnidhra desired to have a son, and therefore he entered a cave of Mandara mountain to practice austerity. Understanding his desire, Lord Brahma sent a celestial girl named Purvachiti to Agnidhra's hermitage. After dressing herself very attractively, she presented herself before him with various feminine movements, and Agnidhra was naturally attracted to her. The girl's actions, expressions, smile, sweet words, and moving eyes were fascinating to him. Agnidhra was expert in flattery. Thus, he attracted the celestial girl, who was pleased to accept him as her husband because of his mellifluous words. She enjoyed royal happiness with Agnidhra for many years before returning to her abode in the heavenly planets. In her womb, Agnidhra begot 9 sons: Nabi, Kimpurusha, Harivarsha, Ilavarta, Ramyaka, Hiranmaya, Kuru, Bhadravasha, and Ketumala. He gave them 9 islands with names corresponding to theirs. Agnidhra, however, his senses unsatisfied, was always thinking of his celestial wife, and therefore in his next life he was born in her celestial planet. After the death of Agnidhra, his 9 sons married 9 daughters of Meru, named Merudev, Pratirupa, U- Ugradamshri, Lata, Ramya, Shamya, Nari, Bajra, and Devaviti. So that was the summary to chapter 2. I'll go on and read text 1 now. Shri Shuka Uvacha Evam Pitari Sampravate Tad Anushanse Vartmana Agnidro Jambudvipa Puksha Praja Rosavad Dharma Vikshamana Praya Gopayat. It's a prose, by the way, so no meter. Evam Pitari Sampravate Tad Anushansane Vartmana Agnidro Jambudvipa Kasa Praja Arasavad Dharma Vikshamana Prayogapayat Evam Pitari Sampraverte Tad Anushasane Vartmana Agnidro Jambudvipa Kasa Praja Aurasvad Dharma Vikshamana Prayogapayat. Would our in-person attendee like to repeat? Oh, okay. Sri Shukadev Goswami, Uvacha said, Evam, thus, Hitari, when his father, Samparvatate, took to the path of liberation, Tat Anushasane, according to his order, Vartamana, situated, Agnidhara, King Agnidhara, Jamvudvipa Okasa, the inhabitants of Jamvudvip, Praja, citizens, Urasavat, as if they were his sons, Dharma, religious principles, Avekshamana, strictly observing, Prayogopayat, completely protected. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Sri Shukadev Goswami continued. After his father, Maharaj Priyavata, parted to follow the path of spiritual life by undergoing austerities, King Agnidhra completely obeyed his order. Strictly observing the principles of religion, he gave full protection to the inhabitants of Jamvudvip, as if they were his own begotten sons. Purport. Following the instructions of his father, Maharaj Priyavata, Maharaj Agnidhra ruled the inhabitants of Jamvudvip according to religious principles. These principles are exactly contrary to the modern principles of faithlessness. As clearly stated here, the king protected the citizens the way a father protects his begotten children. How he ruled the citizens is also described here. Dharma Vikshamana, strictly according to religious principles. It is the duty of the executive head of state to see that the citizens strictly follow religious principles. The Vedic religious principles begin with Varnashram Dharma, the duties of the 4 Varnas and 4 Ashramas. Dharma refers to principles given by the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The first principle of Dharma or religion is to observe the duties of the 4 orders as enjoined by the Supreme Personality of Godhead. According to people's qualities and activities, society should be divided into Brahmanas, Kshatriyas, Vaishyas, and Shudras, and then again into Brahmacharis, Grihastas, Vanaprasts, and Sannyasis. These are religious principles, and it is the duty of the head of state to see that his citizens strictly follow them. He should not merely act officially. He should be like a father who is always a well-wisher of his sons. Such a father strictly observes whether his sons are performing their duties, and sometimes he also punishes them. Just contrary to the principles mentioned here, the presidents and chief executives in the age of Kali are simply tax collectors who do not care whether religious principles are observed. Indeed, the chief executive of the present day introduced all kinds of sinful activity, especially illicit sex, intoxication, animal killing, and gambling. These sinful activities are now very prominently manifested in India. Although 100 years ago these four principles of sinful life were strictly prohibited in the families of India, they have now been introduced into every Indian family. Therefore, they cannot follow religious principles. In contrast to the principles of the kings of old, the modern state is concerned only with propaganda for levying taxes and is no longer responsible for the spiritual welfare of the citizens. The state is now callous to religious principles. Srimad Bhagavatam predicts that in Kali Yuga, the government will be entrusted with Dasya Dharma, which means the occupational duty of rogues and thieves. Modern heads of state are rogues and thieves who plunder the citizens instead of giving them protection. Rogues and thieves plunder without regard for law. But in this age of Kali, as stated in the Srimad Bhagavatam, the lawmakers themselves plunder the citizens. The next prediction to be fulfilled, which is already coming to pass, is that because of the sinful activities of the citizens and the government, rain will become increasingly scarce. Gradually, there will be a complete drought and no production of food grains. People will be reduced to eating flesh and seeds, and many good, spiritually inclined people will have to forsake their homes because they will be too harassed by drought, taxation, and famine. The Krishna consciousness movement is the only hope to save the world from such a devastation. It is the most scientific and authorized movement for the actual welfare of the whole human society. Om Gena Charamandasya Ginanjana Shalakaya Chakshmulitamena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Sadagora Bhaktivinoda. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. So in this purport, Prabhupada is comparing and especially contrasting the modes of life or the social organization of the inhabitants of the age of Kali, that is the current society or us, and contrasting it with the situation in previous times, in previous yugas, because it is mentioned here that um, Maharaj Priyavata, uh, he gave up his kingdom to follow the path of spiritual life, and so he gave the kingdom to his son, King Agnidhra, who made sure that the religious principles were being upheld in all sections of society. Uh, there are many things that seem uh, kind of wondrous about this, well, about the life of Maharsh Priyavata. And one thing that we find again and again throughout Bhagavatam, which might uh, surprise us or uh, give us pause or cause us to reflect uh, on the differences between what goes on in the Bhagavatam and our current understanding or the way things are currently done. One of these things is, of course, there are many kings throughout Srimad Bhagavatam who have willingly given up their kingdom and gone either to the forest, to the mountains, uh, some secluded place in order to practice spiritual realization. This is generally not done these days. Uh, one sees actually that even into advanced age, people want to hold on to their power. We see in the case of politicians, at least in the US, that the politicians are getting older and older. And instead of retiring, they have become content to become a fixture in Washington, D.C., and just keep on wishing to be reelected again and again. Uh, because people do not know that in the actual system of life that is set up for the greatest chance uh, at good social organization, one towards the end of life entrusts one's activities to the next generation, and for oneself focuses on spiritualization and where one will be going when one gives up the body. Uh, and what to speak of, kings and presidents. Anybody, practically anybody with a little wealth these days, uh, outside of Krishna consciousness, will want to uh, give it up. People just want to collect more and more wealth and keep it, even though they have more than they could ever spend. Uh, but in proper society, the there's the understanding that different phases of life have different uh, rules or different goals. Uh, it's described in the purport, the divisions of the Varnashram system: Brahmanas, Kshatriyas, Vaishyas, and Shudras. And then, of course, Brahmacharis, Grihastas, Vanaprosts, and Sannyasis. And all of these have different uh, occupational duties. They, they have different types of activities that they do, differing mentalities, uh, and differing approaches to life and how to work in a society, which is all lost nowadays. There is not uh, really any knowledge of how the different occupational divisions are supposed to act. For example, what their duties of these different varna, what the duties of the different varnas and ashrams, or of any uh, status of life is done. The emphasis these days is, of course, not so much on duty and what one can do to contribute to society, but on rights. What is owed to me instead of what I owe to others. And by and large, instead of all of these different mentalities, uh, there's really one mentality in the age of Kali Yuga. Uh, the fact that there is one mentality would not be so bad if that mentality was Krishna consciousness, but unfortunately it is not. The mentality is described in the Bhagavad Gita. I have so much today, tomorrow I'll have even more. There's my enemy, tomorrow he shall be dead. Uh, I will just amass more and more wealth, more and more power, and in this way I will be the supreme controller. Uh, and actually, throughout all of the uh, places where we would see the activities of these uh, different varnas and ashrams, we see this mentality being manifest, this mentality of I'm the controller, this world is made for my enjoyment. It is manifest everywhere. I know in my, just to give a personal example, uh, I know myself and many other people uh, originally got interested in science uh, to actually try to get to the truth, maybe even the absolute truth uh, of trying to figure out what is the actual basis of reality. But when I was studying for my PhD, uh, there's actually very little concern with that. People might pay lip service to the uh, noble and impartial search for knowledge, uh, which is kind of emblematic, or what would have been done by the Brahminical class in previous times. But the actual practicality of it is that uh, it really became all everybody was always searching after money, prestige, trying to outdo one another. And just because of the culture of academia these days, because one spends so much time uh, in the office or in the lab, simply because one must spend a lot of time to be able to compete. One's friends are also academics, but they're also the ones you are competing against for these grants and positions. And, if my friend gets a tenure track at this university, then I cannot get a tenure track. And such a mentality uh, goes on. I even have there's at one point, I mentioned this before in class, but I'll mention it again. There's at one point where we actually kept a project secret for 2 years. Nobody was allowed to talk about it outside of our group because we were afraid of being scooped, as that somebody would hear us talking about it and then do it really quickly uh, while we were working on it and publish, and then we wouldn't get the glory. Uh, because, as I said, in this modern uh, age, instead of this Brahminical or Brahminical-like activity uh, of searching for knowledge being done solely for that sake, it is done for the aggrandizement of the people doing it. Uh, Likewise, the other occupational duties are uh, also have their uh, what they would have been doing, their activities done in a uh, perverted way, in a way that is not according to the religious principles, because of this mentality of uh, that one is a controller, that one is uh, the supreme enjoyer. Likewise, on the side of the ashrams, this mentality also uh, does not recognize uh, the stages of life for their usefulness in pointing one towards the ultimate goal of Krishna consciousness. Uh, in fact, many times it's the exact opposite. Uh, I'm thinking specifically the brahmachari ashram, uh, which is sometimes translated as student life. Uh, of course, in the Vedic injunctions, one is supposed to submissively serve one's spiritual master. There's supposed to be strict separation uh, from women during or between men and women, boys and girls during the student life. But I was just reflecting that the student life uh, these days, in high school and college, has exactly the opposite connotations or the opposite expectation. In the modern era, it's expected that high school and college students will be engaged in these illicit activities, exactly the opposite of student life or brahmachari life in the uh, previous eras. I actually, there's a news article not too long ago where the people writing the news were lamenting that Gen Z was having lower rates of illicit sex because they're thinking this is a big problem because of this hmm, mentality of that people should compete for their own enjoyment, and that should be the goal of their life. Uh, and so they think uh, that, oh, our children are not having illicit sex, so unfortunate for them. Uh, when actually the exact opposite is true. So, in any case, uh, it is also mentioned that uh, the religious principles, when they are not followed, particularly the religious principles uh, of the administrative class, of the Kshatriyas, that all sorts of calamities will take place. Uh, of course, there is the oppression by the government, uh, as Prabhupada points out in this purport, and also it's mentioned in the 12th canto, when talking about the predictions of Kali Yuga, that the government will be run by rogues and thieves, and that the uh, only way of, or not the only way, that their only interest will be to tax the people for their own personal wealth, increasing their own power, and uh, in all ways using the mechanisms of the government for their own enjoyment. And we see this, of course, nowadays. And this will cause more and more social unrest, more and more distress to the people. And uh, we see this practically these days, that people are becoming uh, more and more uh, angry, more and more um, delusions, etc., and social unrest in all manners is increasing. For example, ongoing right now at my alma mater, Temple University, is a graduate student strike uh, because of the uh, kind of anger or disappointments of the graduate students to the temple administration and to the uh, labor policies and the system, that system as a whole. Uh, they have started to go on strike, which I think is now entering its fifth or sixth week of most of the teaching assistants not going to teach classes at the university. Uh, this is because of anger at the administrators who are either uh, ineffectual, they are not able to actually give protection to these citizens, or are just wicked, that they don't care about giving such protection to the citizens. Uh, and further, uh, consequences of these wicked administrators, or either wicked or ineffectual administrators, as pointed out in the purport, is that rain will become increasingly scarce. And one might think that uh, this has somewhat of a mystical or subtle connotation. That is, people might think that, oh, if people do not follow religious principles, then the demigods will get angry, and then they will just withhold rain. That is, of course, there. There is the control of the demigods under the direction of Krishna, uh, of the various forces of nature. But also, uh, there is kind of a more naturalistic or more straightforward view, which is, of course, that uh, just like the ineffectual leaders cannot protect the citizens, they also cannot protect the earth. They cannot protect the climate, to use modern uh, terminology. And uh, in so many ways, in so many policies, the uh, policies of the administration is causing uh, these natural and social disturbances to propagate. I've heard my Guru Maharaj, Devamrita Swami, talk about before, where the latest research on, uh, or the latest opinions on the kind of state of humanity at the moment. Where is humanity going? What are its dangers? that the two uh, biggest monsters, or the two biggest problems, are climate change and the possibility of nuclear war, both of which, of course, could have devastating effects on um, the planet, particularly, I think, nuclear war, uh, just because the destructive powers of um, these weapons are so great that uh, the first order effects, the second order effects, and the long term effects are so devastating that if one that if such a thing comes to pass, then uh, the world will be radically changed. So both of these things are really due to ineffectual heads of state. Uh, but Prabhupada also gives the prescription. Like any good physician, he both diagnoses the disease and then gives the medicine for how to overcome the diseased condition of modern society, of material life. Uh, and that is the Krishna consciousness movement and the process of Krishna consciousness. Because, as the last line of the purport says, it is the most scientific and authorized movement for the actual welfare of the whole human society. Because one can overcome all of the ills of Kali Yuga by, uh, well, in one's own person, by taking up the process of Krishna consciousness, and then in the greater society by preaching the process of Krishna consciousness. And in this way, those people, or us, who are born in the age of Kali, are actually very fortunate because the system is so simple compared to that which is recommended for previous ages. We can't, or it'd be very difficult for us to stand in meditation for so long, to do these uh, expensive and intricate fire sacrifices or other sacrifices. Uh, if we could even find somebody who is qualified to chant the proper mantras. Um, but in the age of Kali, the process is very simple. Just chant Hare Krishna. Uh, it's even described, or I've heard described, that the demigods wait to be born in the age of Kali because for them, it's you chant Hare Krishna for a very short amount of time, 50 years, 60 years, 70 years, which to the demigods is like nothing. Uh, and then you go back to Godhead. Uh, and not only that, we have the opportunity by the grace of Lord Chaitanya to go to the highest realm of the spiritual world. Uh, of course, everybody is attracted to different things in the uh, spiritual world. Some are attracted more to the Vaikuntha level, some to various other relationships. But as Prabhupada points out in the introduction to Bhagavad Gita, I believe, that if one makes an impartial study of the various rasas, then the highest is the mood of conjugal love uh, that is emblemized by the gopis of Vrindavan. And this is actually the mood or the mm, approach to devotional service, or the uh, end result of the devotional service of the process taught by Lord Chaitanya. That is what he came to give to everyone. That in this uh, Iron Age, in this most degraded age of Kali Yuga, one can actually attain the highest form of love of Krishna by this very simple process of chanting Hare Krishna, hearing about Krishna, remembering Krishna, following the various rules and regulations of devotional life, and in this way, uh, make very good use of one's life in this age of Kali, and both for oneself and for the world, to make uh, what is the lowest into the highest. So we have about 11 minutes left, assuming everything is on time. Are there any comments, questions, corrections?
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Prue. Thank you for the very engaging class.
Thank you.
So I'm wondering. Okay, what am I wondering? I'm wondering about yeah. So like you were saying about this thing in the grad school and how they're striking. I'm
Yeah.
sure in our own spheres we can all kind of think of yeah, just how everything's like going downhill, and yeah, I've heard it say like, okay, you know, this is and said I've heard it said by, you know, very respectable, knowledgeable, advanced devotees that okay, this is the nature of this material world. So we just, you know, yeah, like you were saying, just chant Hare Krishna and just realize that's what this world is about. So we should get out. But at the same time, in Prabhupada's purport, he mentions how we can actually like the Krishna conscious movement is the hold on, I'm pulling it up. But yeah, it's like the savior, right?
Yes.
And he even says it seems like he even says that so the Krishna conscious movement is the only hope to save the world from such devastation. So I guess I'm wondering, does that mean we can actually like change the course of, you know, of the history and like all these predictions we hear about Kali Yuga? We can actually turn those things for the better. And how much should we be involved in, like, you know, trying to like better the world materially, versus like, you know, just giving, like only being concerned with like, okay, if you want to chant 16 rounds, follow the 4 regular principles, then we have something to do with you. But you know, because we hear like, yeah, we shouldn't get too caught up in like all this mundane welfare work and all that. So I guess anyways, those are just some questions I have, if you can address them.
So for the first part, can we actually change the course of Kali Yuga? I think so. I don't necessarily have a Shastric reference for this or anything, but my understanding is that we can help hold it at bay for a little while longer. I don't think, because of course the Yuga cycle, the uh, progression of the Yugas and how they go on in their characteristics is ordained by the will of the Lord. Uh, so I don't think there's any totally getting rid of the Yuga cycle. However, we might be able to hold it at bay for a while longer if we uh, spread this Krishna consciousness movement. The Prabhupada said that his books will be law books for the next 10,000 years, meaning that we have at least the span of 10,000 years where people will be somewhat interested, at least, in Prabhupada's books. Of course, there will always be devotees uh, somewhere on the earth, um, but yeah, my understanding is that we can help hold it off, and we can certainly help liberate the individual souls that are in Kali Yuga. Even if we can't, um, even if we can't stop the whole societal progression, it is still of eternal benefit to every soul that joins Krishna consciousness or even just hears the name Krishna. So that's my perspective on that. And the second one, as far as uh, establishing these social issues, I think it's a bit of a complicated question. Of course, the main thing is spiritual practice. Um, uh, Chanting Hare Krishna. But then, of course, there's the famous statement that Prabhupada said the second half of his movement is establishing Varnashram, which is uh, a way to socially organize the society. Uh, and then, of course, the third perspective is that uh, devotees who live outside, work outside, uh, who are kind of in that stage of life, might have to interact with these things. Um, and for example, in my case, the graduate student strike started like a month or two after I left. But if I was still uh, working at Temple University, if I was still a graduate student there, I would have to engage in it some way, right? I'd have to decide how I'm going to interact uh, with the strike in this example, whether I would, uh, if I was in such a position, whether I would join it, whether I would uh, not join it, uh, if I was approached to scab, that is to take over a striking worker's position, what would I do, etc. Uh, so, yeah, in certain modes of life, uh, we do have to engage in these social considerations, and then of course we need to. There's the desire to establish Varnashram Dharma. What exactly that looks like, we aren't really sure yet. So, uh, but of course, just to repeat, the main thing is to keep the main thing the main thing. And the main thing is Krishna consciousness. So hopefully that helped alleviate some confusion and not cause more. Uh, let's see. All right. That's yeah.
Yeah, one thing I heard in regards to the first point I brought up is that I mean, I even, because I think there's even statements about like creating like almost like a Satya Yuga like environment. So I heard it was like putting a greenhouse, you know, where you can actually, yeah, even though the conditions are very intense, you can kind of like, if you put a greenhouse, you can kind of like, yeah, mitigate those detrimental effects. So I thought that was an interesting analogy.
Yeah. All right. Kaylee, you have your hand up.
Hare Krishna. Yeah.
Right.
So this has, Hare Krishna. Thank you for the class. It's really, really sweet. Lots of good points. So I know you say that Prabhupada says that the conjugal love is the highest relationship you can have with Krishna. But I'm just kind of curious and like wondering about even the dangers of, you know, expressing this so much, especially in Kali Yuga, since I mean most of us maybe we don't know what a real pure love is. And so it feels like emphasizing on this kind of relationship can be very, I don't know, it might get confusing. Do we even really know what that looks like? Things like that.
Yes. So one has to apply, when talking about these things, one has to apply some level of discretion. Right. So I brought it up, because, we're all have read or are reading Prabhupada's books. Uh, we're listening to lectures. We're devotees here. I wouldn't necessarily bring up conjugal love, like, the rasa of conjugal love, uh, in a class to new people, precisely for that reason that people would get confused. Um, so yes, one can talk about it, and Prabhupada does talk about it, but one has to uh, apply discretion in how one does it. Uh, Otherwise, you're correct. Um,
Okay, thank you.
yeah, so yeah, the people will be confused and take it the wrong way, and instead of being elevated, will end up becoming more degraded. So it's 8 o'clock, but I don't know the status of how things are going. So I guess, are there any other points? If there is, we can keep talking until I hear the conch shell, or we can end class here.
So, not sure there's time to address them, but thank you for a nice and engaging class. I always enjoy hearing your perspectives. A lot of questions came to my mind. I also have comments in connection with particularly Dasa Prema's questions. Maybe I should talk about that because that's quicker. Srila Prabhupada assured us that by our practice of Krishna consciousness, and particularly the activities of the Sankirtan movement propagating Krishna consciousness, the distribution of books, especially even Harinam Sankirtan, had the potential to very profoundly affect the of history. And practically, there was a point in time when the United States and the Soviet Union inexorably towards nuclear war. The efforts, the preaching efforts, have been credited by many actually averting that disaster, at least for the time being. The Soviet Union collapsed. Krishna consciousness broke out. All the former Soviet Union, now Russia, is full of an incredible number of devotees of a few stalwarts, including Dave Amrita tirelessly and took great risks to try to make Krishna consciousness available. So changing the course of history is absolutely preaching Krishna consciousness. As far as remedying social ills and those types of things are they are side effects of Krishna consciousness. We don't endeavor for them directly. That's not our concern. Others will be concerned with that, and there are plenty of people endeavoring for this and that sort of welfare activity. But devotees are very rare, and the best solution of all, we cannot afford to have devotees' time and attention diverted for anything other than purely the propagation of Krishna consciousness. Prabhupada's others be concerned with social welfare. We will focus on the highest welfare. But the one of the side effects, of course, of propagating Krishna consciousness is that a host of social ills are remedied. And I don't want time to go into detail, but I'm sure everyone has some understanding of this. So that's our approach, that we focus on Krishna consciousness. The activities of the Lord Chaitanya Sankirtan movement and everything else about as a natural consequence. Srila Prabhupada told us that if we could make just 1% of the world's population Krishna conscious, that completely change the course of history, and that the world would become Krishna conscious. That we speak about the golden age of Lordship, 10,000 years, a period during which Krishna consciousness would globe. And so that's how it would come about. Robert explains, first establishing a certain number of devotees, and then everything else would follow naturally from there. Gradually, politicians would be replaced by actual devotees, because people would be dissatisfied with the status quo and would seek real solutions, which only so anyway, I think I've expressed what I was trying to say there. I had some questions about some of your experiences and perceptions. I'm always interested to hear these things. Generally in Srimad Bhagavatam class, we do not concern ourselves with matters of opinion. We want to hear the absolute truth. We may be interested in the opinion of the previous aryas, but or Krishna's opinion. Gita famously says, that sometimes he expresses opinion, but we don't express our own opinion generally, but I'm generally reluctant to ask people for their opinion, but I would ask you for your opinion about things, because you have opportunity to understand some things that I think valuable for some of us who are trying to propagate Krishna consciousness to have an understanding. So you were talking a little bit about some of at least my understanding of what you were expressing is that within the scientific community, academia, there is inherently within the structure of these institutions, they are structured such that they lend themselves to various types of corruption.
Yeah.
And so then and Sariputta and Dhruta wrote about this kind of thing quite a bit. I used to hear a lot of it from Sariputta directly. But so then, to what extent can we trust the science? We hear, presently there's controversy. You have on the one hand people who are saying you should trust the science, and others who are skeptical. And the skeptics are dismissed as some sort of I can't think of the appropriate word here now, but you become regarded as a conspiracy theorist. You are ridiculed. But it seems as though in many cases the skeptics are following the safe path. We were encouraged to follow the science with regards to how we dealt with COVID, and there is an increasing body of evidence now which to understand that we made a lot of pretty serious mistakes, and the science was quite wrong. Not only wrong, but sometimes outright lying to us. So I wonder to what extent should we trust the science? Is science trustworthy anymore, or has like, for example, the noble occupation of journalism has pretty much died now. Has science died? Is there still good science, or has it been thoroughly lifted? To what extent should we trust it, or are we now forced to have to second guess everything that we hear? What are thoughts?
Skepticism is always a good idea. Like the whole point of the scientific process is that one is skeptical of various things, and they and that the person making the claim has to show some sort of evidence for whatever claim they're making. As far as in general, I think it really depends on what branch of science you're looking at. Some things people don't really fake so much, like particle physics. Nobody is going to go in and fake experiments usually to get what they the results they want. But certain fields, especially like the examples that you were saying, any field that is closely related with politics, I would be very skeptical of what the science is saying. And even before this whole COVID situation, there's was called is called the reproducibility crisis. That there's certain fields, especially psychology and biology, but even some fields of physics, where uh, there are experimental results or just results that when somebody goes to try to reproduce them, uh, they are unable to. And then, of course, people are wondering, like, is it a bad experiment? Did somebody just make up data? Did somebody engage in what's called p-hacking, uh, where basically you do all sorts of statistical magic with your data to get something significant, or make something look significant when it isn't. So yeah, I would say in many cases, be skeptical. I would always, if one has the inclination, or the ability to, I would always try to check the actual science coming out, like trying to look at the actual papers coming out instead of relying on some journalists or government officials' uh, interpretation or selection of the papers. So that's my thoughts. I guess the short answer is, in many cases, science has become untrustworthy due to, in part, being taken over by uh, ideologues. I hope I'm not labeled too much of a conspiracy theorist by saying that, but that's kind of my perspective on things. Basically, anything that has impact on anything in the real world uh, has been fought for at the very least. Anything that's just kind of ethereal, like, math or string theory or things, you can probably trust the results there, but uh, those don't have anything to do with how you actually live your life. So that's just my 2 cents, I guess.
I would love to talk to you at length sometime about climate science.
Okay.
With regards to climate science, we are told by some politicians and some scientists that the science is settled. The science is settled, and we should just accept the science. But then there are other scientists that say is not settled, but your conclusions are wrong, and here's our findings. So there is actually serious debate, a lot of debate, and it was pointed out, for example, that only 97% or something of all scientists agree about climate science, and that was shown to be actually patently false. That's not true.
Yeah.
It's just a false statement. There have been a number of scandals in connection with climate science. So, evidently there is a powerful political influence. There's some kind of agenda. It's not real clear exactly what's going on, but I don't know, somehow or other, all the predictions of the climate scientists so far have been spectacularly incorrect.
That is true.
Everything that they've told us was going to happen by some particular point in time. Those times passed, and nothing of the sort happened. So, I don't understand exactly what's going on, what the motivations are, how this science has been corrupted. But you know, it's very contentious. There are different camps with different ideas about this. Obviously, the climate changes. It has always changed. Climate change is a real thing. The question is, to what extent are human beings influencing this, and where's it going to go? Are we really in jeopardy? Then you have some scientists who will say, well, if trying to reduce the input of greenhouse gases is not practical, that the costs are prohibitive, the impact on our quality of life severe. It is more practical to and less expensive to find the ways to adapt to the change. So there's all kinds of debate going on, but we have, unfortunately, politicians and a lot of scientists who are seriously endeavoring to panic people, describing all kinds of doomsday scenarios, evidently with the intent of trying to frighten people into submission somehow or other. Doesn't seem like a healthy condition to me. I don't understand what the actual agenda is, but it seems clear that nobody really understands climate science sufficiently well to actually be able to make any kind of a prediction. It's kind of like trying to predict the weather. The factors are so many and so complex that our greatest supercomputers still can't really, accurately predict what's going to happen. But anyway, this is one of those things that that impacts people profoundly. It affects our lives in all different kinds of ways, because governments create policies and enact laws on the basis of these things, and but it may all be a terrible mistake. Wouldn't be unprecedented. We've seen all kinds of mistakes in the past. Taxation, Srila Prabhupada talks about taxation here. Now, it's been the policy of the U.S. government to take advantage of every kind of crisis anywhere in the world to try to address the issue by sending mind-boggling sums to other places in the world, and at the expense of the hapless taxpayer. But it's been shown that in many cases, because in practically all cases, there is no system established for accountability. The money just disappears. Nobody actually knows where it goes. In some cases, we know that none of the money got to where it was supposed to go. So where did the money go? We're sending billions of dollars here and there, and Ukraine now, we're sending both arms and colossal sums of money. And then we discover that Ukrainian politicians are traveling around Europe, staying at the most expensive hotels and shopping like spending millions of dollars that they've acquired somehow or other on themselves. And arms that were sent to Ukraine are turning up all over the world. They've been sold to other countries. So, there's lots of corruption and very, very little accountability. It's generally assumed that our politicians are taking advantage of a chaotic situation to basically launder money, to take taxpayer money abroad. You make a deal with some country or other, some leader. Hey, look, we're going to send you, so many billions of dollars. You are welcome to pocket some percentage of it personally, and then another percentage you will return to us in this particular way. It's going to go through these particular organizations clandestinely, and then the balance to be spent for the intended purpose. So it's a bad time in the world. Things are very corrupt. Kali Yuga. We should expect lots of horrors. Anyway, I'm running off on wild tangents here. And any sign of their lordships or?
I think the doors are about to open, just judging by the sounds going on behind them. So
Okay.
yeah, we might. I won't comment too much on all of these things yet. If you want to meet up sometime, we can talk about climates and agendas. That's fine. But
I,
I won't get
I
us kicked. I don't want to get us kicked off of YouTube. So
yeah, I'd love to hear your thoughts. All right, thank you again. Hare
thank you.
Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai. Appreciate it.